life is living us, my teacher used to say. Our heart is beating on its own. We're breathing normally, right, on its own. Our autonomic nervous system is humming along on its own. Our sensory system is humming along on its own. Literally, life is sort of propelling us into existence. And, I think most of us get that as a concept, but to really stop and feel it is a very deep meditative and even yogic practice. Hello and welcome back to the Embodied Relationship Experience podcast. My name is John Wineland. Today, we are going to talk about 3 kinds of intimacy practice. And of course, these are intimacy practices that I use, that I teach, that I write as foundational intimacy practices as part of the 3 pillars of sacred intimacy. What we're going to get into today is just kind of drilling down into what it means to have an intimate moment. And I'll get into the depth of each practice. One practice is energetic, one practice is human to human, and one practice is what we would call, say, divine essence to divine essence. Before we jump in, please like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. That really helps us get the content out. Please leave a comment and a question. We're happy to take comments and questions on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate and review, so that'll also help us get the content out. So for those of you who've been following my work for a little while, you know that I talk about sacred intimacy in 3 pillars. And the first pillar of sacred intimacy is the practice of intimacy. And that I define as literally creating a sameness, recognizing a sameness, and removing the distance between you and another. Now, that could be you and a child, that could be you and a lover, that could be you and a tree, that could be you and any space. So becoming intimate with something or somebody is something that involves no sexual energy at all. It's really about, the human to human experience. And it's about removing the space between us so that there is a recognition of sameness in one another. The second pillar of sacred intimacy is devotion to love itself, which, I'll get into in another very long podcast where I'll break that down into sort of a piece-by-piece subcategories of what that means and what that practice is. And the third pillar of sacred intimacy is sexual polarity, which is the recognition of difference, which is the amplification and recognition of, I have a masculine essence, you have a feminine essence. We're going to amp those up. We're going to amp those differences up to create an arc of attraction. And again, as I've said many, many times, that is not gender specific. It could be switched gender-wise. It could be same-sex couples, but creating this arc of sexual polarity, that's where the juice of intimacy comes in. So we've got these 3 pillars. The first one is intimacy. The second one is devotion. The third one is sexual polarity. And today we're going to dive into the practice of what it means to share intimacy with another. So there are 3 primary ways that I teach to do that. Now, other people may have other practices that are totally valid. I just, I've narrowed it down to 3 ways that I think people can practice. And again, this is a practice, right? This is not something that is just a mental understanding. It's really an embodied and energetic practice to remove the space between you and I. And the 3 ways that I suggest people practice this, the first is an energetic intimacy. The second is, again, a human-to-human connection, heart-to-heart connection, sharing our humanity together. And the third is the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. The first thing that's important to recognize in this practice is that you don't need both partners to be practicing. Now, it's of course nice if both partners are practicing this sort of mutual recognition and mutual removal of distance between 2 parties, but it doesn't need to be that way. it's really quite simple once you kind of attune your body to and your nervous system to the intricacies and the nuances and the subtleties of another person's energetic, human, and divine experience, right? So the first approach to this, I'm going to call energetic. And the practice itself is one of recognizing that there is this kind of hum of life happening in virtually everything. Everything has a transmission. Everything has a frequency. So this is true of a great boulder in the middle of the desert. This is true of a tree. This is true of a pet. This is, of course, true in our children. This is true in our friends. And this is, of course, true in our intimate partners. So the capacity to train our bodies to feel that not only the hum of life that is moving through us at any moment, but also the hum of life that is moving through another at any moment, and to literally sort of merge those energetic frequencies together. So how do we do this? Well, like most practices that I teach, it begins with breath. So when we slow the breath down and we make our breath low and slow, and we literally quiet the mind, deepen the breath, get a little more still in the body. Doesn't mean we don't have to be rigid, but still, we can start to pick up on this hum of life that is literally happening automatically. It's quite miraculous when we think about it, right? This, life is living us, my teacher used to say. And, our heart is beating on its own. We're breathing normally, right? On its own. Our autonomic nervous system is humming along on its own. Our sensory system is humming along on its own. Literally, life is sort of propelling us into existence. And, I think most of us get that as a concept, but to really stop and feel it is a very deep meditative and even yogic practice. So the first step in practicing this energetic intimacy is to get intimate with the energy moving through your own body first, right? To literally feel the hum in your fingertips, or the hum moving up and down the center column of your body, the hum that is sort of pumping the blood through your body. If you've got emotions or sensations happening in your body, if you track down beneath those emotions or sensations, you'll feel this sort of hum of life that is giving birth to those sensations and emotions. And this capacity to get sensitive, right? To bring both awareness, our great masculine gift, and sensitivity, our great feminine gift, to a moment that's happening through us, is a really beautiful meditation in and of itself. So I would recommend that we just start by feeling that sort of river of life, that hum of life that is happening through us in any moment. Take a moment and just do that. Take a few smooth, deep breaths. Try to still your body and let your mind be spacious and empty, and feel the hum of life that is happening through you. Should feel pretty good. So once you have that, you sort of recognize that, you can spend some time just getting intimate with yourself, right? Like we talk about intimacy as something that happens usually with another. We rarely talk about what makes self-intimacy. So one of the first practices of getting intimate with another is to first get intimate with ourselves. So if we're aware of this hum of life, this stream of life that's happening through us, and we're aware, scanning our body for sensations, tightnesses, fluctuations, constrictions, openness, right? Just so we get aware of what's happening energetically in our body, we can then start to tune our awareness and our sensitivity towards another. So from my hum of life, I'm going to start to tune in to your hum of life. And the way that I do that is through looking into your eyes, through breathing, matching my breath to yours. And in the matching of my breath to yours, I'm beginning to attune my nervous system more and more to your nervous system. So we talk about things like eye gazing as a really beautiful intimacy practice, and that is, but just eye gazing in and of itself can be somewhat superficial, and it can be filled with thought and distraction and, awkwardness and all of that stuff. But once we start to really tune in to what is making us hum and what is making another hum, things deepen. The moment deepens together. So if I am looking into your eyes, I'm breathing with you, I'm aware of this hum of life and the sensations of being alive in my body, and I start to breathe with you, and I take my sensitivity and I just sort of place it onto yours, I'm going to start to feel this sameness, right? It's different, right? Like your transmission is different than mine, but there's a sameness to the hum of life that is happening in both of us at the same time. And a good way to play with this is to get close physically and literally start to feel more and more. Maybe you're kneeling right next to each other, right in front of each other, knees almost touching, or maybe you're standing and you're just, a few inches apart from each other. You'll start to feel this pulse. You'll start to feel this, energetic transmission or signature coming through another. And in doing that, in training your breath and becoming aware of their hum of life and your hum of life, you'll again start to notice the similarities and this sort of beautiful shared experience of having life live us, through us at the same time. And in doing so, we literally merge our energies. And it's quite a delicious experience to practice. Now, of course, if your partner is not practicing with you in the moment, that does not mean that you cannot bring this practice to them. You could stand behind them, for example. Let's say your partner is cooking dinner, or your partner is, laying in bed with you, right? You can obviously kind of snuggle up to them and then do the practice that I just laid out. You feel the hum of life in yourself, be aware of the sensations or maybe emotions moving through your body. Try to feel deeper into the sort of source of life or hum of life. It's kind of like the Force, for those of you who are Star Wars fans, right? That is moving you, and you can start to tune your hum to their hum. You might even start to breathe in a way that invites them to breathe with you. And you can kind of impose a little intimacy on them. Most of the time, they'll feel it. Most of the time, they'll feel it. And unless there's something, some issue going on between you two, or something that needs to be cleared, it'll usually be reciprocated. Eventually, what will happen is you can evoke your practice, your intimacy practice can actually evoke more energetic openness and stillness in them. And in the doing so, we remove the distance and we merge our energies. Now, it doesn't take a genius to understand that in doing that, we are sort of priming the pump for deeper physical intimacy. It's a really beautiful, we've all had that experience of being sexually intimate with somebody, but not being energetically synced up. And so taking the time, even just a couple of minutes, to sync up with their energetic hum and to feel the life that's moving through them, you can see how just right away that would deepen physical intimacy and deepen and nourish sexual intimacy. So this first practice of learning to get sensitive to your own energetic pulse and to get intimate with yourself. And then from there to bring that to another is a very simple and beautiful way to practice intimacy. Now, the second form of intimate practice is what I would call human to human recognition. Now, that is, I'm having an experience of being human here. I've got a heart, I've got feelings, I've got sensations, I'm living life, I'm, dealing with joys and disappointments and fears and, my own brand of neurosis. And you're probably doing the same. And so when we start to reveal our shared humanity to another, and we start to really tune in to each other's fears, each other's desires, each other's experience of being human, and we begin to recognize our own experience of being human through another, that is another beautiful form of intimacy. So similarly to the way that we would begin that first practice, we start in the same way. We get intimate with ourselves and we start to scan and track, again, deepening the breath, letting our body ground, letting our body get a little more still, and becoming aware of what is the human experience that I'm in right now. Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I having, crazy thoughts? Am I turned on? Is my heart activated or is it closed? Am I being defended or am I being open? And to continue to just really scan what is happening in my heart and in my body, just as a human being living the human experience in this moment. So it's a little more particular to me as a human, as a personality, as, someone who is, traversed the experiences of life. And then it's me turning that self-intimacy towards you and creating space to see, to witness, to experience your human experience in this moment as well. So again, we start with becoming intimate with ourselves. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I sensing? What am I bringing to my humanness? How is my humanness being expressed in this moment? And then from that place of being with my own heart, literally feeling the weight of my own heart, feeling the texture of my own heart. Is it hard? Is it soft? Does it feel full? Are there emotions moving through me that I should recognize? And then creating space for you to have that experience. So what this might look like in a practice, now this usually requires words, whereas the first intimacy practice I laid out doesn't necessarily and probably shouldn't have any words, should be silent. This requires words. And a classic version of this is to share fears. Right. And this is really beautiful experience for two intimate partners. And what it might look like is first me getting intimate with my own experience and then asking you, do you have any fears that you want to share with me? And then while I'm staying intimate with myself, I'm also making space to receive whatever fears you have to share. So I might just give you, 2, 3, 4 minutes to just talk about what you're afraid of, right? And in doing so, what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm trying to feel that tender part of your heart, what the Buddhists would call bodhicitta, through the tender part of my heart, right? So this second practice of intimacy really involves being aware of the tenderness within, and then also recognizing the tenderness within another. And in doing so, the Buddhists have presented this as a bit of a spiritual practice, as a bit of a meditation. I'm sensing this tender, vulnerable part of your heart through the tender, vulnerable part of my heart. And in this practice of sharing fears, I'm hearing you through the tender and vulnerable part of my heart. So I'm listening to your fears. I'm acknowledging your fears with a yes, a nod, a smile, a thank you. And I'm really keeping that tender part of my heart open to receive the part of your heart that is tender. Another way to work with this sort of practice is just asking you to share, things that you're making up about us or about me, to clear projections, right? Like we all, as humans, have projections going through our minds over and over and over and over all day long. We're making up stuff about other people and, about the world all day long. And so another way to sort of share our humanity is to share our projections. So that might look like, share with me what you're making up about our relationship or what you're making up about me. And then your partner might say, well, I'm making up that you are really annoyed with me and don't actually want to do X, Y, and Z with me. Or I'm making up that when I do this certain thing, you get angry with me. Or I'm making up that you are not as attracted to me as you were. Again, listening to their projections from the tender part of your heart, from your own bodhicitta, and feeling the tender part of them as they reveal this, these projections, these beliefs, the things we make up, which are often not helpful and many times not true. So that's another way of getting to know your partner's humanity through your own humanity and really making space for both of you to share fears, to share projections. Another beautiful way to do this is to share things like desires or expectations. So for example, one of my favorite practices is, please share your expectations about, this next period of time together. Like, what are you expecting from me as your partner? Right. And then your partner would share what their expectations are. Well, I expect you to talk to me kindly. I expect for you to contribute in these ways to our household. I expect you to, to show up as an intimate partner. And then because I have expectations too, I can relate to my partner's expectations from the part of me that also has expectations. And then a little bit of a deeper cut here is, okay, well, those are your expectations, but tell me your heart's desires as well. Like, if your heart could have anything it wanted, what would your heart's desire be around our relationship or around our sex or around our parenting or around our lifestyle, right? And then you get to listen again from the part of you that has expectations, the part of you that has heart's desires. You listen to your partner's heart's desires and expectations, and they may reveal some really true and beautiful desires that they have, some of which you can, fulfill, some of which you might not be able to. But the point of this exercise is not finding out what you can and cannot fulfill, but it's about honoring that you both have these things. You both have heart's desires. You both have expectations of each other. You both have this sort of human experience in relationship. And your first focus is to give space for them to be able to share those with you. And in doing so, you guys get to share your humanity. And when our humanity is shared, our fears, our desires, our expectations, our crazy thinking, right? When our humanity is shared in an open and loving way and received in an open and loving way, this space between us dissipates, right? We can just be humans together. We can be crazy, wild, loving, desirous, fearful human beings navigating the human experience together. And that is another form of intimacy that I think really creates a foundation of trust, right? So intimacy practice is not just about removing space, it's about creating trust, right? Because the more we experience the sameness that we have together, the safer we're going to feel, because you're just like me. Like, you are having this beautiful experience of life happening through you, just like me. You have all of these experiences and feelings and emotions and fears and desires, just like me. And we can remove the space that often gets built up in relationship, and we can now see each other human to human. So the first intimacy practice is energetic. The second intimacy practice is this sort of receiving and revealing of each other's shared humanity. And then the third intimacy practice is a bit deeper, and it is feeling into your partner's divine essence through your own divine essence. Now, this takes a little bit more spiritual practice, takes a little more meditative practice. It's a little more woo-woo, but I think you all kind of get the drift here, right? That at the core of your partner is an essence, right? You could call it a soul. You could call it the divine feminine. You could call it the divine masculine. You could call it God. You could call it goddess. You can call it whatever you want. But there is this part of them that is the divine, which is unchanging and much wider and deeper than them as a human being. And so in the recognition of each other's divine essence, we, again, remove the space between, and we now get to experience each other as the divine. We get to have a sort of sacred union practice as, let's call it, a divine masculine essence and a divine feminine essence. And we get to recognize the deepest part of our partners, the most core and foundational part of their being. And in doing so, we get to revel in their infinite and ancient being. Right? So this soul recognition, one might call it, this capacity to recognize the deepest essence within our partners, is also a practice that can be developed and deepened. So the way that I like to teach this is through eye gazing, right? And the practice that I'm actually writing about in my book that's coming up, called The Art of Sacred Intimacy, is that you'll sit in front of your partner. You'll begin to match breath with each other, inhaling and exhaling together. You'll allow the bodies to still a little bit, right? And then you'll begin to gaze into each other's eyes. Now, the first layer of eye gazing is the layer of recognizing just the personality, the human in front of you. The named individual in front of you and all of their, quirks and eccentricities and, amazingness, right? The uniqueness of this individual. So when you're looking into somebody's eyes, that first layer of recognition is one of the person, right? If you gaze a little bit deeper beyond the person and deeper into their eyes, you'll recognize their heart, right? You'll start to feel their heart. And their heart is obviously the deeper part of them, the part of them that, again, has emotions and longings and, yearnings and all of those things. And so you can spend a little bit of time gazing heart to heart. And in that practice, you try to see their heart through the eyes of your own heart. Right? So if you imagine that your eyes were directly linked to your heart, and your heart was looking deep into their eyes and into their heart, a sort of, again, sameness develops, a kind of a removal of the distance. You're just loving love, right? Hearts, recognizing hearts. And then there's a deeper place. So if you looked beyond the heart into their very essence, let's call it like a third layer of depth, you'll feel the part of them that is infinite and expansive. You can feel the part of them that has this kind of inner universe existing, this purity, this depth, right? And so this kind of, again, this ancient soul. So as we move a little deeper into eye gazing and into this practice of removing this distance, once again, trying to keep the breath matched and keep our bodies open in the front, like very open and receptive, soft in the front, and we're gazing deep into each other's souls, that's where we can really begin to experience sameness, right? Or, shared experience of being divine beings having a human experience. And we get to recognize that, and things can get very still and very deep and very, I don't know what's the word to put, I don't know, just both juicy and still, right? I'm trying to put words into an experience that is very hard to name. And it should be. It'll become very still and silent. And in this recognition of the deepest, most divine and ancient parts of each other, virtually all distance disappears. And so if we put all of these practices together and we work with recognizing the energetic experience of being alive, and then we recognize and become witness to and become intimate with the human experience of being alive. And then finally, we recognize and become intimate with the divine experience of being alive. So there's an energetic experience of being alive, there's a human experience of being alive, and then there is the divine experience of being alive. All of that is happening inside us at all times. And so the practices of intimacy are meant to help us recognize that. These practices of intimacy, which could go on for 5 minutes or 5 hours, are meant to celebrate that and to practice that. And the beauty of this kind of consistent practice is that it tends to transcend the human drama. I mean, it recognizes it, in the second piece, but it also transcends it. It doesn't stop there. It allows us to recognize that there is something deeper going on than our personal life drama. And, in our daily lives and in the world and how busy we are and kids and businesses and, everything going on, it's crucial to be able to stop and recognize the deeper experiences happening. That is what depth is. And when we talk about depth, we're really talking about getting attuned to not just what's happening on the surface of a moment, not just what's happening on the surface of another human being, or not just what's happening on the surface of ourselves, but we're literally training our awareness and training our nervous systems and our capacity to recognize the deepest experiences going on at any time. So as I said in the beginning, these practices can also be in a forest by yourself, or in a desert by yourself, or sitting in a dark room by yourself. The possibility of feeling a moment, or feeling a space, or feeling another, or feeling ourselves deeper is always available. So just being able to tune yourself to the infinite sameness of the moment, we then start to merge with that moment, or we start to merge with another, or we start to merge with a place, and we are creating this beautiful, recognized sameness with a person, place, or thing. There's a way that I've always practiced this out in nature, which is to, get close to, I love rocks. It's one of my weird things. Like, I've just fallen in love with rocks, spend enough time in Yosemite and that those things are alive, or in Sedona, that those things are alive. And so I will literally kind of cozy up to a rock, put my hands on it, and begin to, feel the energetic hum of that rock. I'll then, feeling the energetic hum within myself, I'll sort of merge, I'll practice merging and feeling the energetic sort of exchange happening between us. And it's often quite beautiful. There's often, information that will come back from certain spots of nature. You could, of course, do something similar with a pet. I challenge you to try this with your dog or with your cat, right? Just to really stop and feel deeper than the surface. Don't just pet your cat. Like, take some time, put your hand on there, get everything still and feel into it. This is so beautiful to do with a child. I remember I used to practice this, with my daughter, where she would be asleep and I would kind of snuggle up to her and I'd, feel not just the hum of her body living and breathing, not just her heart, but feeling into the deepest essence of her. And in doing so, I get to merge. So this capacity that we have to get intimate with a moment or with another or with a place or with a thing is really one of the most under-practiced meditative superpowers we have. And what it does is it does drop our nervous systems. It does regulate our nervous systems. I challenge you to practice it. Like, go practice this with a tree or a rock or a pet or, Jesus, just yourself, let alone a lover or an intimate partner. And notice what happens to your nervous system as you begin to slow down enough, because slowing down is required. And I challenge you to practice noticing what happens when you slow down and you can get intimate with a moment or with yourself or with another. So those are the 3 practices of intimacy. And feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below, or make any comments that you like, see if there's something else that you guys want me to dive into a little bit more deeply. But I would suggest that you begin to try to just bring some of these practices to your daily life, to your home. And if you want to go deeper in these kinds of practices, we have tons of them on the Embodied Relationship Experience platform. There's a link below. You can sign up and get a free trial. It's a really beautiful community of practitioners from around the world. And we get into not only this kind of intimacy practice, but we get into practices of working with sexual polarity, and we get into many practices of doing repair work and working on the devotion to love pillar that I'll get into again at another time. But if you really are feeling called to deepen your practice, the Embodied Relationship Experience platform is awesome for that. Final piece of business that I'll leave you with is that we are launching our yearly men's training program. It's called the Embodied Men's Leadership Training. I've been doing this now for 8 years. There's usually about 60 or 70 guys. We go out into the desert. We go up into the mountains. We go deep for 6+ months together. And it's one of my favorite programs. I really am proud of what we've created, this sort of band of brothers. Many guys are stay in the program for 3, 4, 5 years. And we're launching that now. It'll start at the beginning of the year. So if you're interested in that, there'll be a link below for you to apply and learn more. So that does it for this episode of the Embodied Relationship Experience. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.